The desert stretched out before her like a living furnace, endless and shimmering under the Arizona sun. The stagecoach wheels had long since stopped spinning, the driver and the guards dead or fled. And Evelyn Carter stood alone in that pitiless expanse, her pale blue traveling dress torn and caked with dust. Her bonnet hung loose around her neck, its ribbons fluttering like dying birds. The air was so dry it cracked her lips and burned her throat. The outlaws had come out of nowhere. 4 of them masked, their rifles glinting in the morning light. They demanded gold, then turned on one another when they realized the passengers had none. A gunshot had scared the horses, and in the chaos, Evelyn had leapt from the coach, scrambling into the rocks with nothing but her canteen and a prayer. Hours later, her shoes were ruined, her corset cutting into her ribs. She stumbled over stone and sagebrush, every shadow whispering of rattlesnakes. The sun dropped lower, staining the sky blood red over the mesas. Somewhere far off, a coyote's cry echoed. A lonely, lonesome sound that carried the weight of a dying world. When she reached the river, she fell to her knees. It wasn't much, just a silver thread of water winding through the canyon floor. But to her, it looked like salvation. She cooped the water in trembling hands, drinking greedily, letting it run over her face. For a moment, she thought she was safe. Then she heard the sound of hooves. They came slow at first, the rhythm steady and sure. She rose heart-pounding, wiping mud from her face. From the red dusk emerged a horse, a great black stallion with a man like smoke and astride him. A man unlike any she'd ever seen. He was bare to the waist, his skin bronzed by the sun, his long hair bound by a strip of rawhide, a necklace of carved bone hung over his chest, and his eyes, dark, steady, wild, seemed to take in everything at once. He sat tall and proud in the saddle, moving with the kind of grace that made her breath catch. She froze, half in awe, half in terror. He said nothing. For a long heartbeat, they only stared at one another. The sound of the river filling the space between them. Then he swung down from the horse. When his boots touched the earth, she saw the weapons at his belt, knife, bow, and a rifle slung across his back. He looked at her, then at the river, and without a word, he led the horse to drink. She turned away, unsure what to do, and that's when it happened. The stallion jerked, startled by her movement, and reared. The man moved swiftly, dropping his rifle and pulling hard on the reins, but the motion threw him off balance. He hit the shallows with a splash, his clothes tearing on the rocks. Before he could stand, the current tugged at him, carrying away what little he wore. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He rose from the water, tall and unashamed, sunlight glinting off his wet skin. For a moment, the world stopped. She'd never seen anything so raw, so wild, so human. There was no shame in him, only power and something ancient, something sacred. He looked at her then, eyes locking with hers, and she felt the air leave her chest. When he spoke, his voice was low, rich like thunder rolling through a canyon. You saw me ride naked, and by the law of my people, now you will be my wife. Evelyn's mouth went dry. What? What? She stammered, taking a step back. He didn't move closer, but his gaze didn't waver either. It is the law of the Apache, he said simply. You have seen me as no one should. You have seen what is sacred. Now you belong to my care. I don't belong to anyone, she managed, her voice shaking. I was lost. I didn't mean to see. He lifted a hand, silencing her. Meaning is for the spirits to decide. The wind picked up, rustling the cottonwoods. Along the river. The stallion snorted and pawed the earth. Evelyn's fear tangled with confusion, and under it all a strange pull she couldn't explain. There was something about him, his steadiness, his calm that made her believe he wasn't threatening her. He turned, whistled low, and his horse came to him. From the saddlebag, he drew a blanket, wrapping it around his waist. Then he looked back at her. You cannot stay here, he said. The coyotes will come. And worse than them, men, she hesitated. You're taking me somewhere. He nodded. To my people, you will be safe. I don't even know your name. Talon, he said. Talon Greyhawk. The name suited him. Sharp, fierce, a creature of wind and freedom. She wanted to argue, to protest that she couldn't go with him, but she knew the truth. She wouldn't survive a night alone out here, and so trembling, she let him lift her onto the horse before him. The ride through the canyon was silent. The desert around them glowed with the dying light, the rocks burning crimson, the sky deepening into violet. Evelyn could feel the strength of him behind her, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the heat of his skin. Every time the horse climbed a ridge, she caught glimpses of endless horizon, wild and untamed. When the first stars appeared, Talon guided the stallion to a narrow pass between two cliffs. "We camp here," he said. He built a fire with dry msket and stone, the sparks rising into the blackness. Evelyn sat wrapped in his blanket, her mind reeling. He offered her a piece of dried meat and a gourd of water. She took them wordlessly. After a while, he spoke again. "You're far from your home." "Yes," she said quietly. "Boston." He tilted his head slightly. "Many miles. Why do you come here?" "I came to teach," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "They needed a schoolmistress in Red Rock Crossing." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "A brave thing. But the West is not kind to the soft-hearted." She smiled faintly. "I'm beginning to notice." For a long time, neither spoke. The fire crackled. The coyotes sang in the distance. Then she said softly, "When you spoke of your law, did you mean it?" His eyes met hers across the firelight. "My people do not speak what they do not mean." Her heart thudded painfully. "So what happens now?" Talon looked into the flames. "Now you rest. Tomorrow we ride to my village. The elders will decide." She wanted to argue, to tell him no one could decide her fate but herself. But exhaustion weighed heavier than pride. She lay down by the fire, watching the shadows dance across his face. As she drifted towards sleep, she thought of his words. "You will be my wife." She should have been terrified, furious, desperate to escape. But instead, she felt something else blooming quietly inside her chest. Curiosity, perhaps even trust. The desert wind whispered through the canyon like a lullaby. Somewhere far away, a hawk cried into the night. And as Evelyn closed her eyes, the last thing she saw was Talon's silhouette against the fire. Strong, still, and watchful. The law of his people might have bound her to him in name, but something deeper, older than any law, had already begun to bind her heart. Morning came slow and gold over the red canyons. The first light of dawn spilled across the rocks, turning them to fire. Evelyn awoke to the smell of smoke and coffee, a bitter, earthy scent that filled the cool air. For a moment, she forgot where she was, lying beneath a blanket of woven wool, her cheek resting on soft sand. But then she heard the faint rhythm of a horse's hooves and remembered everything. The river, the man, his words. "You saw me ride naked. And by the law of my people, now you will be my wife." She sat up quickly, brushing dust from her hair. Talon was crouched near the fire, grinding something in a stone bowl. His back was to her, muscles moving like coiled leather beneath the morning light. He was quiet as always, but there was something in that stillness that wasn't harsh. It was steady, like the earth itself. He turned when he heard her stir. "You should eat," he said simply, handing her a strip of dried venison and a piece of roasted corn. "Thank you," she said softly, trying to sound calm. He nodded once and looked out toward the horizon. "We ride soon. My people are 2 ridges north. You'll be safe there." Evelyn chewed in silence, her mind spinning. "Safe," she repeated almost to herself. "And then what happens?" Talon's gaze flicked toward her, unreadable. "The elders will decide if the law must stand. And if it does, then you are my wife." She swallowed hard, the food suddenly dry in her throat. "And if it doesn't, then you are free to go." That should have comforted her. But it didn't. Something about the finality in his tone, the sense of fate winding around them both like desert wind, made her shiver. By the time they broke camp, the sun was high. They rode for hours through twisting red valleys and open plains. Hawks wheeled overhead, their cries echoing across the cliffs. The world was vast, endless, and wild, and Evelyn felt small in its embrace. Yet every time she looked at Talon, his strong hands on the reins, his face set against the wind, she felt an odd sense of safety. By late afternoon, they reached a cluster of lodges made from hide and willow. Smoke rose from the center of the camp, and children darted through the dust like small spirits. The people stopped what they were doing to stare. Some murmured softly, others frowned. A woman with silver hair approached, her face lined like riverstone. "Talon Greyhawk," she said, her voice both gentle and commanding. "You return not with deer or buffalo, but with a white woman." Evelyn stiffened. "She is under my protection," Talon said, his tone respectful but firm. "She saw the sacred. The law binds her to me." The woman's sharp eyes moved to Evelyn. "Do you accept this?" Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it again. How could she answer? She barely understood the question herself. I didn't mean to see anything sacred," she said finally. "It was an accident." The old woman's lips curved into something that might have been a smile or a warning. "Accidents have meaning, too." Talon spoke quietly in Apache, and the woman nodded. "The elders will speak when the sun sleeps," she said. Then to Evelyn, "You will rest. You are safe here." "Safe?" The word followed her like a shadow. They gave her a small lodge near the river, its walls hung with woven blankets and the scent of sweet grass. The children peeked in, curious but shy, whispering, "Ishta, white woman," before darting away. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, the council gathered. Fires burned in a wide circle, and the air smelled of sage and smoke. Evelyn sat near Talon, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, feeling the eyes of the whole village on her. The oldest man spoke first, his voice deep as thunder. "Greyhawk has invoked the law of the naked ride," he said in Apache. The words translated by a younger man beside him. "It is ancient, sacred. When one witnesses the spirit form of another, their fates are bound. It cannot be undone." Evelyn's heart thudded painfully. "I didn't mean to," she said. "I was lost. I was afraid." The elder looked at her kindly. "The Great Spirit often brings fear to lead us to truth." Talon stepped forward. "I do not claim her by force," he said, his voice carrying through the night. "But she saw me as I was, without pride, without shield. That is no small thing. If she chooses to leave, I will not stop her. But the spirits have seen her heart, and so have I." The murmuring around the fire deepened. Evelyn could barely breathe. She looked at him. This man who spoke of law and spirits with such quiet conviction, and saw not a savage, but someone bound by honor, by something deeper than she could name. After a long silence, the elder raised his staff. "Then the law stands, but not in chains. The woman shall stay among us until the moon turns full. If by then her heart wishes to remain, the union shall be blessed. If not, she may return to her people." The fire crackled, sparks rising into the starlit sky. Talon bowed his head. "So be it." That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat by the doorway of her lodge, watching the moonlight ripple on the water. Somewhere across the camp, she could see Talon sitting alone, sharpening a knife by the fire. He looked solitary, like a man who carried more than one lifetime's worth of ghosts. When she finally gathered the courage to approach, he didn't look up. "You should be resting," he said softly. "I can't," she said. "Not with everyone staring. Not with all this talk of laws and spirits." He set the blade down and finally met her gaze. "You think my people foolish?" "No," she said quickly. "Just different. Back home things are decided by paper and pen, not by visions or signs." A faint smile touched his lips. "And are your papers better than the wind? Your signs stronger than the heart?" She didn't answer. He rose, stepping close enough that she could see the fire reflected in his eyes. Do not fear what you do not yet understand, he said quietly. The desert tests all who enter it. Perhaps it brought you here to learn something only it can teach. Evelyn looked up at him, her breath shallow. And what do you think that is? That freedom is not always found in the world you came from, he said. Sometimes it's found in the one you never meant to enter. For a long moment, they stood like that, the night humming softly around them, their shadows tangled in the firelight. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken, not from fear, but from something deeper, older, as if the desert itself was whispering through her veins. Finally, she stepped back, whispering, "Good night, Talon." "Good night, Evelyn Carter." When she returned to her lodge, her hands were shaking. She lay awake until dawn, listening to the wind sigh through the canyon. She didn't yet know if she believed in Apache law or destiny, but one truth was already clear as the rising sun. She could no longer think of Talon Greyhawk as a stranger. The moon had waxed and waned since the night the council spoke, and with each passing day, Evelyn Carter felt her old world slipping farther away. The rhythms of the Apache camp had become the beats of her own heart, the morning songs sung by, the women grinding corn, the laughter of children splashing in the river, the deep drums that echoed at night like the earth breathing. She learned to ride without side saddle, to cook over an open flame, to weave grasses into baskets. And more than anything, she learned silence, how the desert itself spoke without words. Talon was often gone, scouting the borders where soldiers crept and settlers pushed closer every month. When he returned, dusty and silent, he would sit with her by the fire and tell her stories of his people, of the coyote who tricked the stars, of the eagle who carried messages between hearts. He spoke with reverence as if the land itself listened. She came to see that his law had never been about possession. It was about connection among the Apache. Nothing sacred could be witnessed without responsibility. She had seen him bare, not only in body, but in spirit, and that had tied them together in ways neither could undo. Yet, as the full moon neared, Evelyn's thoughts turned eastward to Red Rock Crossing, to the world she had left behind. She had come to the west to teach, to bring light and letters to frontier children. She had promised herself she wouldn't lose her purpose. So when the time came to choose stay or leave, she found herself standing on the edge of two worlds. "I must go back," she told Talon one morning as the sun rose over the mesas. "My work is there. My people. Well, what's left of them? They're waiting." Talon stood by the river sharpening his knife. He didn't look up right away. When he did, his expression was calm, but there was pain in his eyes. "You have chosen," he said quietly. "I'm sorry," he nodded once. "The heart cannot be forced. Go with the dawn." She wanted him to stop her, to fight for her, but he only walked away, his figure fading into the red haze of morning. 2 days later, she rode into Red Rock Crossing, a town of weather-beaten buildings and restless souls. The smell of whiskey and gun oil hung heavy in the air. Dust coated everything, the signs, the wagons, even the preacher's white collar. When people saw her, they stopped and stared. "Good Lord," someone muttered. "That's the Carter woman. We thought she was dead." Another voice hissed. "She's been with them." Apaches look at her sunburned and wildeed. Evelyn kept her chin high, though her heart hammered in her chest. She dismounted in front of the small church schoolhouse where she'd once planned to teach. The door creaked open and Reverend Moore stepped out, a thin man with a pinched face. "Miss Carter," he said slowly, as if tasting the name. "You've returned." "Yes," she said, brushing dust from her skirt. "I've come to resume my post. I'm still the school teacher here." His eyes flicked over her attire, a borrowed deerskin shawl, silver beads at her neck. "You've been among them." "I was taken in when I was lost," she said firmly. "They saved my life." The Reverend's mouth tightened. "That may be so, but this town won't take kindly to heathen ways. You'll do well to forget whatever savagery you've seen, and remember you are a woman of God." Her jaw clenched. "I remember I'm a woman who owes her life to people more honorable than many I see here." Whispers rippled through the onlookers. The preacher palled. "Watch your words, Miss Carter. There are those here who'd hang a woman for less." She pushed past him and entered the little schoolhouse. Dust lay thick on the desks. The blackboard still bore the faint ghost of her last lesson. Knowledge is the light of the frontier. She set her hands on the wood and breathed deep. Then let's light it again, she whispered. Days passed. The town children returned to her classroom, curious but cautious. She taught them to read, to write, to dream beyond the fences of red rock. Yet the adults never stopped whispering. One afternoon, as she walked home from the schoolhouse, she heard voices behind her. Apache bride, one man sneered. Probably carries their blood in her now. Should have left her where she was, another spat. Ain't no place for her among decent folk. She ignored them, but the words burned deep. Then came the day everything changed. A company of soldiers rode into town, their uniforms dusty, their faces grim. Their leader, Captain Whitmore, addressed the gathered crowd in front of the saloon. The Apache have broken treaty, he announced. A group of them led by a man named Talon Greyhawk has been raiding supply lines near the San Pedro Valley. We ride to put an end to it. Evelyn's breath caught. That's not true, she blurted out. He's no raider. He protects his people from men who steal their land. Every head turned toward her. The captain's eyes narrowed. You know him, she hesitated. He saved my life. He's not your enemy. Then you're a sympathizer. The preacher's voice cut through the murmurs. You defend savages over your own kind. She's bewitched, cried a woman, tainted by heathen blood. A murmur of agreement swelled. Evelyn took a step back. You're wrong, she said, her voice trembling but steady. You don't know him. You don't know what honor means to those people. The captain mounted his horse. Honor or not, ma'am, I have orders. We ride at dawn. Anyone caught aiding them will hang. The soldiers thundered away, leaving a cloud of dust and dread behind. Evelyn stood frozen in the street, her heart breaking. That night, she sat by her window, staring toward the distant messes. She could almost hear the desert wind whispering his name. Talon Greyhawk, the man who had saved her, taught her, and let her go with dignity when she chose duty over love. Now he was in danger because of men who would never understand him. Tears burned her eyes. You told me once, she whispered, that if my heart rode free, it would find you again. Well, Talon, my heart is riding now. She rose, gathered what little she had, a canteen, a blanket, her mother's locket, and saddled a horse under cover of darkness. The town slept, its lights dim, its hate quiet for the night. She rode out silently, her skirt whipping in the wind, her pulse loud as thunder. The desert greeted her like an old friend, vast, lonely, and wild. She followed the stars, the same way Talon had taught her, trusting her heart more than any compass. By dawn, she reached the ridge overlooking the Apache village. Smoke rose from distant fires. Not the gentle kind that cooked morning meals, but the kind that came from destruction. Evelyn gasped. Soldiers, horses, gunfire. The air filled with screams and the crack of rifles. The soldiers had struck early, and as she spurred her horse down the slope, one thought burned through her mind like lightning. She had left one world for another, and now she belonged to neither. But Talon was there, and she would not let him stand alone. The dawn was crimson with smoke. It poured through the canyons like blood spilling from the heart of the desert. Evelyn's horse galloped hard, hooves drumming across the red earth as wind tore at her hair and the sun climbed slow behind the burning hills. The sound of gunfire cracked through the valley, sharp, merciless, echoing like the cries of the dying. By the time she reached the Apache camp, it was chaos. Teepee were aflame. Women screamed for lost children. And the men fought like ghosts of the earth, silent, fierce, unbroken. Soldiers on horseback thundered through, sabers flashing, rifles smoking. Evelyn leapt from her horse and ran, choking on dust and fire. She called Talon's name until her throat burned. The world was madness, a blur of shouting and smoke, but she kept running. She found him near the river, his body strewn with blood and dust, fighting 3 soldiers at once. His eyes blazed, his movements deadly and sure when one soldier lunged. Talon dodged, slammed the man's wrist, and wrenched the rifle free. He fired once, twice, the sound echoing like thunder off stone. 2 men fell. The third swung a saber. Talon caught the blade with his bare hand, blood spilling down his wrist, and drove his knife into the man's chest. Talon, she screamed. He turned, disbelief flickering in his eyes when he saw her. Evelyn, no, he shouted. You should not be here. I had to come, she cried. They said you were raiders. They were coming to kill you all. Before he could answer, another volley of gunfire tore through the air. Evelyn ducked behind a fallen log. Talon dragged her close, shielding her with his body. Bullets winded through the smoke, snapping branches and striking rock. We must get to the river, he shouted. The women and children are crossing. Together they ran, darting through the chaos. An explosion rocked the ground as a wagon went up in flames. Smoke turned the sky to ash. Evelyn coughed, tears stinging her eyes. She stumbled and Talon caught her, lifting her effortlessly as they plunged through the reeds toward the riverbank. Across the water, Apache warriors covered the retreat, firing from behind rocks. The soldiers pressed closer, shouting orders. A bugle screamed, Talon, a voice called from behind. It was Red Hawk, Talon's brother in arms. His arm bandaged, blood dark on his chest. They've cut off the bridge. You cannot cross. Talon cursed under his breath. Then we make our stand here. He turned to Evelyn. Stay behind the rocks. Do not move, she grabbed his arm. No, I won't hide while they kill you. His eyes softened just for a heartbeat. You are brave, my white dove, he said. But bravery cannot stop bullets. Before she could answer, the soldiers burst from the smoke. 5 of them, rifles raised. Talon swung his weapon up and fired. 2 fell. A third staggered but kept coming. Evelyn snatched a dropped revolver from the ground and fired wildly. The recoil jolted her wrist, but the bullet found its mark. The man fell backward into the sand. Talon turned in surprise. She trembled, the gun smoking in her hands. I'm not as soft-hearted as you thought, she said hoarsely. He gave a grim smile. No, you are fire. Then came a terrible sound, a familiar metallic click. Talon spun too late. A soldier on horseback aimed from the ridge above. Evelyn saw it happen as if through water. The muzzle flash, the puff of smoke, the bullet slicing through air. She didn't think. She just moved. Talon, she screamed and threw herself in front of him. The shot rang out. Pain exploded through her shoulder, hot and white. She fell hard against him, the world tilting and fading. Talon caught her before she hit the ground. His voice breaking as he shouted her name. No, no, stay with me, Evelyn. Look at me, her vision blurred. She could taste blood and smoke. You're safe, she whispered. That's all that matters. Quiet, he said fiercely, pressing his hand to her wound. You will not leave me. Not now, she smiled weakly, her voice fading. I came back. I found you. Then the darkness took her. When she awoke, it was night. The battle was over. The wind whispered through the blackened ruins of the camp. She lay beneath a blanket by the river, the stars burning cold above her, her shoulder throbbed, bandaged with strips of leather and cloth. Talon sat beside her, his face weary, streaked with soot. His shirt was torn, his chest wrapped where a blade had grazed him. But his eyes, they were alive with something fierce and bright. You live, he said softly, the relief in his voice raw. She tried to sit up, but he held her gently. Rest. You have done enough. What happened? She asked. The soldiers retreated. Red Hawk and the others drove them into the canyon. Many are gone, but we still stand. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't gone back to Red Rock, if I hadn't told them. Do not say that, he interrupted, his voice low but firm. You did what your heart believed right. The fault lies with men who do not listen. He took her hand, pressing it to his chest. She felt his heartbeat, strong, steady, alive. The law of my people brought you to me, he said. But your heart kept you here. Her lips trembled. I thought I wanted to go home. He looked at her, eyes glinting like embers. You're home. The silence between them was heavy, sacred. The river murmured nearby, carrying moonlight across its surface. In the distance, a coyote cried to the stars. Evelyn reached up, her fingers brushing the scar at his temple. You could have let me die, she whispered. And let the sun fall from the sky. His voice cracked. You gave me reason to fight again, Evelyn. You made me remember I was more than a ghost of war. A soft breeze stirred her hair, carrying the scent of smoke and sage. What happens now? She asked. Talon looked out over the burned camp. We rebuild. Always we rebuild. The land takes, but it also gives. That is its way. She nodded, understanding him in a way she hadn't before. Then I'll stay. I'll help rebuild, too. He smiled then, a rare, quiet smile that seemed to melt the pain from the night. Then the spirits have chosen well. As the first light of dawn crept across the canyon walls, Talon pulled her close, wrapping her in his blanket. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Above them, the desert sky turned gold, washing away the blood and smoke of yesterday. And though she carried a wound that would scar her for life, Evelyn felt whole for the first time. Spring returned slowly to the canyon lands. After the fire and smoke of war, the rains came, soft and patient, like the desert, remembering how to breathe. The river ran clear again. The hillsides bloomed with wild flowers, and the air was sweet with the scent of new life. Evelyn Carter walked among the ruins that had once been charred, now bursting with green. Her shoulders still ached from the bullet wound, but she bore the pain the way the land bore its scars with quiet strength. The Apache village had risen again, rebuilt from cedar and hide, and the laughter of children once more filled the morning air. Each sunrise she woke to the rhythm of drums in the sight of Talon Greyhawk riding out across the plain, tall, proud, and unbroken. To the settlers he was a savage. To his people he was the wind that would never bow, and to her he was everything she had never known she needed. Evelyn had stayed true to her promise. She became the bridge between two worlds. She taught the children letters and numbers beneath the cottonwood trees. Her chalkboard carved from slate and her ink made of crushed berries. She translated for the traders who came with goods, keeping peace with words where others would have used guns. At first, the Apache women watched her wearily. But they soon saw she did not seek to change their ways, only to share what she knew. They gave her a new name, Sana, meaning the rose who endures the sun. In time, the men stopped calling her the white woman and started calling her Greyhawk's Rose. One evening, as the sun bled gold over the mesas, Talon returned from the northern ridge. Evelyn was kneeling by the river, washing the day's dust from her skirts. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. You're late, she teased, her voice soft but steady. He dismounted, leading his horse to drink. The soldiers have gone east, he said. The valley will be quiet for now. She stood and walked to him, her shawl fluttering in the wind. You say that every time, she said, and every time the quiet ends. Talon smiled faintly. Then we'll be ready when it does. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if she were something fragile the world might try to steal. You're wound, he asked. Healed, she said, placing her hand over his. It'll scar, but I don't mind. Scars remind us that we lived, he said quietly. They stood like that, listening to the river whisper between the reeds. The air smelled of rain and wild sage. Evelyn looked up at him and saw something shift in his eyes, something like resolve, heavy and tender all at once. Talon, she asked softly. He took her hand and led her to the place where the rocks met the water. There, half buried in sand, was the first piece of wood from the new lodge he'd been building. "It is finished," he said. "Our home," she blinked. "Our home?" He nodded. "By the river, where the spirits brought us together, where you first saw me ride." Her heart stilled. "You remember that?" His mouth curved into a rare smile. "A man does not forget the moment fate finds him." They entered the new lodge together. It smelled of cedar and sweet grass, its beams carved with Apache patterns of rain and wind. In the center stood a small table upon which lay a single white rose, the kind that didn't grow in this land. Evelyn gasped softly. "Where did you get that?" "I rode 2 days to the trading post near Tucson," he said. "They said it came from the east, from your world. I thought perhaps it should be here, too." She touched the petals gently, tears pricking her eyes. "Talon, it's beautiful." He looked at her with that same quiet intensity that had frightened her once long ago by the river. Now it only made her heart ache with love. He took her hands in his and said, "The elders have spoken. They say the spirits have already blessed what the law began. They ask if you would take me, not as the law commands, but as your heart chooses." Evelyn's breath caught. For a long moment, she could only stare at him. The man who had saved her life, taught her courage and shown her a world not of rules and fences, but of sky and freedom. "I chose you the moment I came back," she whispered. His fingers brushed her cheek. "Then you are my wife, not by law, but by love." The wedding took place at twilight. The whole village gathered by the river, their faces glowing in the firelight. The old woman with silver hair, the same one who had once questioned Evelyn's presence, spoke the words of union in Apache. Two spirits, once strangers, bound now by the sky and the wind. The land has seen you. The fire bears witness. Evelyn and Talon stood before her, their hands joined, the setting sun spilling gold across their faces. She wore a dress woven by the women of the tribe, embroidered with red thread that shimmered like flame. Around her neck hung her mother's locket, and beside it the bone necklace Talon had given her. When the ceremony ended, Talon lifted her hand to his lips. "You once saw me ride naked beneath the sky," he said softly. "Now I ride with nothing hidden between us." Laughter rippled through the crowd, gentle and full of warmth. Evelyn smiled through tears. That night, the drums beat low and slow, echoing through the canyons. The stars hung heavy above them, and the air smelled of smoke and wild roses. They danced until the fire burned down to embers, her head resting against his chest. His arms wrapped around her as if the world itself could not touch them. Months passed. The settlers in Red Rock Crossing still spoke of her. Some calling her lost, others calling her fallen. But now, when traders came to the valley, they brought news of her school for the Apache children, of how she taught them to read both English and their own stories, so that no one could ever erase them. The soldiers did not return. The land quieted, and each morning Evelyn and Talon rode together at dawn. Across the open plains, side by side, they moved with the rhythm of the wind. Sometimes he would point toward the horizon and say, "That is the way of freedom. No fences, no end." Sometimes she would laugh and answer, "Then I suppose I'll follow you there." Their love became a legend, whispered in both tongues. The tale of the woman who came from the east and the warrior who rode with the wind. And when the spring rains came again, Evelyn would walk by the river, her skirts brushing the wild roses that now grew along its banks. Each bloom reminded her of that first night when a stranger had spoken words that once frightened her and later became the vow of her heart. "You saw me ride naked, and by the law of my people, now you will be my wife." But now, she whispered them back with a smile, her hand resting on her swelling belly. The child of two worlds growing within her. "No law made me yours, Talon Greyhawk," she murmured to the wind. "Love did." The breeze stirred the petals of a white rose lying on the water. It floated downstream, caught the sun, and disappeared into the golden light, just as two riders appeared on the horizon, moving together into forever.